Picture this. There's a man watching this video right now who shares your exact birth year. His W-2 mirrors yours down to the last dollar. But tally up his assets against his liabilities and his net worth is quadruple yours. It's the kind of gap that could make anyone feel inadequate. Here's the brutal, counterintuitive twist. He isn't outpacing you. He's actually lagging behind. If his current habits stay frozen in place, his retirement balance 30 years from now will be a shadow of yours. Smaller, less resilient, far less capable of funding a comfortable life. I know how offensive that sounds. How could someone with 4 times the wealth today end up with less tomorrow? Let's dissect the raw arithmetic, piece by piece, and prove exactly why this paradox holds. Both are 38. Both pull down $95,000 a year pre-tax. Same metro area, same competitive job market, same federal tax bracket. On paper, they're clones. Now look under the hood. Ryan rents, no real estate, no mortgage. His entire net worth, $60,000, sits in a broad market index fund, fully liquid. He could log into his brokerage on a Tuesday afternoon and have that money in checking by Wednesday. He's disciplined to fault, automatically diverting 18% of gross income, $1,700 a year, before he even registers the direct deposit. Despite that, Ryan feels perpetually behind. He scrolls financial forums and feels a pit in his stomach. Brian went the homeownership route. Back in 2019 at 31, he bought a $280,000 house with 10% down, $28,000. He financed the rest, $252,000, on a 30-year fixed at 4%. The market has been extraordinarily kind. That house is now worth roughly $421. He still owes about $216, so his equity sits just over $205,000. Add a $30,000 retirement account and $6,000 in checking, and Brian's net worth comes to a tidy $240,000. Brian sleeps like a baby. He feels validated. Do the division. 240,000, 60,401. Brian is worth 4 times more than Ryan. Not 4%, 4 times over. That's the snapshot. Run both men through every personal finance checklist and viral rule of thumb ever published. Fully funded emergency fund? Both pass. Consumer debt under control? Brian's mortgage is current and cheap relative to today's rates. Pass. Is your net worth growing? Brian's balance sheet's expanded nearly $90,000 in 3 years without lifting a finger. Pass. Ahead of the average for your age group? Brian sails past it. Ryan gets flagged as severely behind. Do you own real estate? Brian scores a perfect mark. Ryan doesn't even qualify to take the test. Every green check mark goes to Brian. Ryan closes his laptop feeling defeated. Brian closes his feeling reassured. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Both reactions are wrong. They're built on a broken framework. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. The whole problem with this genre of content is that it demands trust in vague assertions without ever showing the math. So here's the math, decide for yourself. Every one of those checklists measures asterisk position. Position is the static coordinate of where you're standing right now, a freeze frame. Your net worth is a position. Your account balance is a position. Whether you've got 3 months of expenses saved is a position. Every item on every list asks a binary yes or no question about where you sit on the day the algorithm serves you the video. But nothing about your financial future is determined by that static coordinate. It's determined by which direction you're walking and how fast. That's not a position, that's an asterisk flow. Position and flow aren't just numerically different, they're categorically different, in a way that makes one of them nearly useless as a predictor. Hold position constant and let flow diverge. 2 people, both with $100,000 net worth, same age, same day. Person A saves 20% of income religiously every year. Person B saves nothing. He inherited the entire $100,000 from a late aunt. On the day of that financial snapshot, they score identically on every checklist. Tied. Fast forward 30 years, and they're not remotely the same species of financial animal. Now flip it. 2 people both saving 18% of income, identical portfolios, identical returns, both 38. One has $300,000, the other has $40,000. Why the gap? Maybe one started saving at 22, the other at 32. Maybe one went through a divorce that split assets in half. Their current behavior is identical, yet their positions differ by $260,000. What's that gap actually measuring? Time. That's the whole variable. It quantifies how long someone has been doing the right thing, and it gets reported back as a moral verdict on their discipline and character. This isn't philosophy. It's hard arithmetic, and I can prove it by taking apart the most famous benchmark in personal finance. The Millionaire Next Door, 1996, gave America a simple formula, arguably the single most quoted "Are you on track?" test ever devised. Take your age, multiply by your pre-tax income, divide by 10. Hit that number and you're a prodigious accumulator of wealth. Miss it, and you're an underaccumulator. A 40-year-old earning $100,000 should have $400,000. Simple, memorable, viral. Let's audit it with zero mercy. Take a 25-year-old earning $60,000. His target, $150,000. He's been working 3 years. Suppose he saves 100% of every dollar. No rent, no food. Invested entirely at a 7% real return. The standard long-term assumption in serious financial modeling. After 3 years of monastic living, he'd have roughly $192,800. He passes barely, and only by living on nothing. Now let him save a realistic 15%. After 3 years, he has $28,934 against a $150,000 target, short by over $121,000. To actually pass at 25, he'd need to save 78% of gross income starting at 22. Here's where the algebra gets interesting. The target is age times income U10. What you can actually accumulate is savings rate times income times compounding factor. Income appears on both sides. It cancels out completely. The required savings rate to pass this test has nothing to do with your income. It depends on exactly one variable, your age. Run the numbers down the age curve. At 25, the formula demands 78% savings. At 38, 13.6%. At 50, just 6.2%. Read that again. The test demands 78% from the young and 6% from the old. It's savagely punitive to newcomers and hands out participation trophies to anyone who's simply been breathing longer. A 50-year-old who saved 6 cents on every dollar he's ever earned passes the most quoted test in personal finance and gets told he's a financial superstar. To be fair to the book, the honest version of this formula is far more useful than the viral one. If you're in your late 30s or 40s, it's asking for something like 8-14%, a reasonable directional check for that career stage. It only breaks catastrophically at the young end because the formula has no term for how long you've been working. It scales purely by age, treating a 25-year-old with 3 years of earnings the same as a 55-year-old with 33. That's not a rounding error. It's a missing variable that makes the whole equation absurd for millions of people. You've heard it endlessly. The average American salary is $59,428. It anchors nearly every signs you're doing well list. It's wrong in 2 directions at once, which is exactly how you end up feeling inadequate no matter how much you actually earn. The wrong population. That figure is computed across every single earner in the country. 19-year-old coffee shop employees, students who worked 4 months, retirees doing seasonal gigs. The actual median salary for a 38-year-old is roughly $66,000. If you're 38 earning $70,000 and quietly benchmarking against $59,428, you're feeling reassurance that was never earned. You were compared against teenagers and told you won. Asterisk error 2, median. This one cuts the opposite way. $59,428 a mean. Everyone added up divided by headcount. Income isn't a neat bell curve. It's heavily skewed by the ultra-rich. Stick strictly to 38-year-olds. The median earner makes $66,000, but the mean 38-year-old makes $86,915. That's a $21,000 gap describing the exact same cohort on the exact same day. Where does that come from? The top 1% of 38-year-old earners pull in $450,000, nearly 7 times the median. And every time a statistician computes a mean, those outliers inflate the benchmark a warehouse supervisor in Ohio gets measured against. Put both errors together. You're compared against a pool padded with teenagers, which flatters you, and simultaneously against a mean, inflated by half-millionaires, which crushes you. Same data set, 2 lies pointing in opposite directions. Pick whichever one ruins your evening. The most cited scare stat of them all. Most Americans can't cover a $1,000 emergency expense. Go read the actual survey. It doesn't ask whether you can cover it, it asks how you'd pay for it and offers a menu. Savings, credit card, borrowing from family, a loan, cutting spending. The terrifying headline is simply the share of people who didn't pick savings. Think about the implication. A guy with $80,000 liquid who says, I'd put the car repair on my rewards card and pay it off at the statement close gets counted as someone who can't afford a $1,000 emergency. The survey measures preference and reports it as capacity. Those were never the same thing, and the numbers wobble depending on who's asking. One national survey this year of over 2,200 adults found 43% couldn't pay from savings. In the same window, another major survey found 47% had sufficient liquidity. Same question, weeks apart, a 10-point gap. There's no single true number, there's a range, a survey design problem, and an entire industry quoting the output as gospel. First, a fairness correction for Brian, or this comparison is a cheap shot. Brian contributes $3,800 a year to retirement, 4% of gross income, anemic next to Ryan's 18%. But that's not Brian's true savings rate. Every month, part of his mortgage payment vanishes into interest, and part goes to principal, which doesn't vanish at all. Principal reduction is money migrating from checking into his own balance sheet. That's saving. It's forced, invisible, and it counts. This year, Brian will pay down $5,913 of principal. His honest savings rate is $3,800 plus $1,913, or 10.2% of gross income. Brian is saving over 10% and has no idea. He'd tell you he saves 4% and feel mildly guilty about it, and he'd be objectively wrong because nearly 60% of his saving is invisible to him. Ryan saves 18%. Brian saves 10.2%. That 7.8-point gap is the entire behavioral difference between these two men. Now run them to 65, a 27-year horizon. Assumptions clearly labeled. Today's dollars stripping out inflation. Equities return a real 7% annually. Neither man gets a real wage increase. Both stay flat at $95,000 in purchasing power. Brian's house appreciates at 1% above inflation. When his mortgage is paid off at 61, he redirects the entire former payment into investments, a generous assumption that favors Brian. At 38, Brian leads by $180,000. At 45, the lead has shrunk to $128,000. At 52, it's down to $13,700. 14 years of being 4 times richer, and he's about to stop being richer at all. At 53, the crossover. Ryan's portfolio hits $595. Brian sits at $585. Neither man feels a ripple. The market doesn't send a congratulatory notification. By 65, Ryan commands $1,646,000. Brian, home equity and all, has $1,092,000. Ryan is ahead by $554,000, $500,000 in today's purchasing power, separating two men who earned the identical salary their entire adult lives, one of whom was a 4-to-1 winner at the midpoint. Fair objection, 1% appreciation feels conservative. So let's destroy this variable properly instead of hand-waving past it. I ran the simulation across a range of real appreciation rates. At 0% real appreciation, Ryan crosses at 51 and wins by $684,000. At an optimistic 2.5%, stronger than the best sustained 35-year stretch American history, 1971-2006, Ryan still crosses at 59 and wins by $285,000. Even at a bullish 3% real appreciation for 27 straight years, Ryan crosses at 62 and wins by $170,000. There's no realistic appreciation rate in the historical record where Brian ultimately comes out ahead. Robert Shiller's data shows American house prices were essentially flat in real terms from 1890 to 1997. Brian's 4 times lead was never a real lead. It was a snapshot of a financing decision made one afternoon at a closing table in 2019, in a market that later did something nobody predicted. It was weather, not climate, and he spent nearly a decade reading the weather as an infallible scorecard of his financial virtue. If the checklists measure the wrong coordinates, what's the right framework? 3 numbers calculable tonight with a calculator and your bank statements. Your true, all-in savings rate. Not the dollar amount, the rate. Retirement contributions, taxable brokerage deposits, and yes, the principal portion of any mortgage payment. Brian's 10.2% was just as real as Ryan's 18%. Over Ryan's 27-year run, the deciding factor wasn't market returns. Both got 7-to-or income. Both earned $95,000. It was exclusively that 8-point gap in savings habits. Those 8 percentage points were worth $554,000. Your savings rate is the one variable in the entire equation you fully control, and it's the one variable every mainstream checklist conveniently ignores. Your liquid share. What fraction of your net worth can you actually deploy in a crisis? Ryan's is 100%. Brian's is 15%. Over $204,000 of Brian's $240,000 is locked in the walls and roof of the house he lives in. He can't spend a hallway to cover a medical bill, can't rebalance it into a hot sector, can't access it without either selling his shelter or borrowing against it and paying interest for the privilege. Net worth you can't deploy isn't doing the work the headline number implies. It's benched, not in the game. Your trajectory delta. Project what you'll realistically have at retirement age given your current savings rate. Independently project what you'll need to sustain your desired lifestyle. Subtract. What matters is the sign, not the size. The size is a fantasy, since nobody can predict 30 years of market returns. Anyone who claims they can is selling a newsletter. But the sign is remarkably robust. It survives radical changes to your assumptions about inflation, returns, and wage growth. Ryan's sign was positive at 38 with a mere $60,000 and a persistent feeling of failure. Brian's sign was negative at 38 with quadruple the assets and total peace of mind. That single contrast is the entire thesis of this video. There's a man watching this right now who shares your exact age, earns exactly what you earn, and has 4 times your net worth. He's real. There are millions of him in suburbs across the country. Now you have the exact framework to understand why he's losing the long game. But here's the harder, more introspective half of this. It's not just Brian who's being deceived by a flattering photograph. You've probably spent this whole video assuming that means you're Ryan, quietly on track, unfairly judged by a shallow system. Maybe you are. But check that assumption honestly, because the same arithmetic that exonerates Ryan is equally capable of convicting Brian. Both men were certain they knew which category they were in. So don't take my word for it. Go home tonight and run your own 3 numbers. Your true savings rate, including the invisible principal paydown, you've probably been undercounting the same way Brian did. Your liquid share, how much of your wealth is actually working for you versus frozen in place. And the sign of your trajectory delta, pointed toward a surplus or walking backward with a pleasant expression on your face. The question was never whether you're doing well by the standards of a viral checklist. The question is whether your feet are pointed in the right direction. And unlike every other superficial judgmental question this genre asks, this one actually has a verifiable mathematical answer. Look at your vector, not your coordinates. That's the only compass that's ever mattered.